Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Dodgers Dawgs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker and it is an absolute privilege to be your host this afternoon for you guys to be able to talk about the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers have 2 more weeks left to go in the regular season before it's all go. Everything has been building up to these final moments, and especially during these next 2 weeks for Dodgers baseball, everything for the postseason is going to be set up. The games right now aren't necessarily the games you want to win the most. That comes in October. But in order to set your team up with the best opportunity to be able to succeed in October, it starts this week, and more importantly, it starts tonight for the Dodgers. The Dodgers are going up against the Philadelphia Phillies. And where the standings are, and we're actually going to go ahead and pull the standings up right now. These are the standings to the National League right now. You have the Milwaukee Brewers that are leading baseball right now, or at least the National League, with a record of 91-59. The Dodgers are 6.5 games back of the Milwaukee Brewers with 13 games to go. They will almost assuredly, especially since Milwaukee took all the games against the Dodgers, they will not be catching the number 1 seed. They are currently 4.5 games behind the Philadelphia Phillies with 13 games to go. Philadelphia with an 89-61 record. Dodgers 84, and 65 as their record. The Dodgers are 2.5 games up of the San Diego Padres. They are in good position right now to go ahead and make the postseason. But if the Dodgers want any sort of chance, any sort of hope to go out there and make a run at the number 2 seed, this starts tonight. The Dodgers face off against the Philadelphia Phillies in a 3-game series in Dodger Stadium. There's 13 games to go right now. After this series, there's going to be 10 games left for your Los Angeles Dodgers. And if the Dodgers want any sort of hope of going out there and getting that number 2 seed, it is an absolute necessity to go out there and sweep the Philadelphia Phillies. If the Dodgers are able to win all 3 games of the series against the Philadelphia Phillies, that means they are a game and a half back of the Philadelphia Phillies in the standings. I believe they played 1 less game than the Phillies, so they would have to chance to be able to turn that into a 1-game deficit, and then they just have to hope that Phillies are able to drop some games. Dodgers have a little bit of a tough schedule coming up ahead, or at least some teams going up against some teams that are going to be competitive going forward. You have this 3-game series against the Phillies, which the Philadelphia Phillies are a really good baseball team this year. The next series is a 4-game series against the San Francisco Giants, who, yes, the Dodgers were able to win that series against the Giants, still is going to be tough competition because the Giants are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. Following that, they go on the road for the final 6 games of the regular season against the Arizona Diamondbacks, which, if you have not been paying attention to the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Diamondbacks are only 2 games back of the last wild card spot, which means they are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. And then they close it out with a 3-game series against the Seattle Mariners, which the Seattle Mariners, currently the leader in the National League West, and are going to do everything they can to win the National League West. It is going to be a tough battle for the Los Angeles Dodgers to go out there, and if they want any semblance of hope of getting that number 2 seed, the Dodgers have to go ahead and sweep the Philadelphia Phillies. That is what is on the line for the Dodgers in this series. It's going to be very tough because the starting pitching for the Philadelphia Phillies this season, and especially the pitchers that the Dodgers are going to be going up against this week, which tonight it's going to be Ranger Suarez, difficult left-handed pitcher that's had a ton of success, followed by 2 additional really solid left-handed pitchers for the Philadelphia Phillies in Christopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo. It's going to be a really tough task for the Dodgers to be able to overcome, but the opportunity is in front of them. And at the very least in this series, because even if the Dodgers are not able to sweep this series, but let's say that the Dodgers go ahead and win the National League West. If the Dodgers were to advance past the wild card, the Philadelphia Phillies would likely be the team they end up matching up against, assuming the Phillies remain in that number 2 seed. Again, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, currently fighting for that number 1 seed in the National League West, or National League just in general. it's very likely that the Dodgers could have to play the Philadelphia Phillies at some point during the postseason. This is going to be a big-time game to potentially set up postseason seeding, or at the very least, be a preview of what is to come for the upcoming weeks of postseason baseball for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I could not be more excited about it. Should be a fun series to be able to watch. And it should be some fun interactions with you guys as well. It obviously is a privilege for me to be able to do this, and I just want to thank you guys again for being able to interact. Just talking about the show, we'll do a lot of Q&A with you guys today, talking back and forth with the series of Philadelphia. We'll actually get into the chat right now if I can get my mouse over here, because we actually have some fans that are actually going to be in attendance to the game. Darren Lopez, thank you, is en route to the game right now from Visalia. Let's go Dodgers. That's absolutely right. Enjoy the game. I reemphasize what Chris Valborg was saying. Enjoy the game. Cheer loud for the Dodgers and hopefully get them to a place where they can go ahead and win some games against the Philadelphia Phillies and set them up in the best position possible for the Dodgers in the postseason. It's probably, and this is just from an outside perspective, it's probably going to be, just looking at the odds stacked up against the Dodgers, it's going to be very difficult to go ahead and sweep the Phillies with the way the Phillies have been playing baseball lately. Lately, Philadelphia, if you look at the past month since August 15th, has I believe it's a 138 WRC plus as a team. They are gelling even without a Trey Turner who's not going to be available for the series. Even without an Alec Boehm, they've had other players step up to the occasion. Harrison Bader, who was a trade target for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and there was a lot of question marks of how his bat was going to do, even from me, who was somebody who was pushing him as a real serious contender to be an addition for the Dodgers. He has absolutely gone out there and absolutely performed for the Phillies, a 160-some WRC plus for Harrison Bader. He has really made a big impact into that lineup. Of course, one of the big things with the Phillies, and the Dodgers are going to see it right ahead, is their starting pitching. The Phillies' starting pitching is really, really good. They also made an addition. Yohan Duran obviously is going to be a great addition to that bullpen for the Phillies. The biggest thing, and this is going to be probably the key, and this is going to be something that we probably talk about if the Dodgers and Phillies match up in the postseason, one of the things that the Dodgers are going to have to do is they're going to have to match with the Phillies' starting pitching, which I think the Dodgers have the ability to be able to match with their starting pitching, but they're also going to have to get to the bullpen before Duran's going to enter to the game, because right now Yohan Duran is pitching incredibly well for the Philadelphia Phillies. They also have Matt Strahm, but if you look at the rest of the Phillies bullpen, there potentially could be some openings for them, and perhaps this is just because there's either a David Robinson who's a little bit older, or some guys with a little bit more limited experience, or for example, with the Phillies currently in their bullpen right now, they do have Lou Trevino, who was pitching for the Dodgers earlier this year. I think there's going to be potentially some opportunities if you can keep the game relatively close, and if you take good quality at bats and force the Phillies to go to the bullpen before they're able to get to Duran. I think that's where there's going to be potentially some opportunities for the Dodgers to be able to enter into these games and have a little bit of success. But that's just a little bit from my outside perspective. Getting to the chat right now, being able to interact with the people that are with us today. CNAV, Kristen Navarro, good afternoon to you as well. Chuck Huddleston is in the chat. Johnny Ewan, we will get to postseason roster talk. And something that I try to do here on this show, and this is incredibly difficult when you're talking about things from a theoretical perspective. Okay, could we have this person? And Casey and Coach Barikoff, who had a show yesterday, highly encourage you guys to be able to check that out after the Dodgers won against the San Francisco Giants. Talked a lot about postseason pitchers that they could use and add to their roster, whether or not they should make the postseason roster. What we're actually going to do, like I often do with this, is I put a little bit of work. We're going to have actually we're going to have it visibly laid out for you guys, and then we can have a little bit of back and forth as far as, okay, should this player make the postseason roster? What are some of the differences between the wild card round, assuming that the Dodgers have to play in the wild card round for their postseason format, versus some historical trends with the Dodgers roster? together for the division round, for the championship round, and for the World Series, because there is slight differences in how the rosters are typically constructed depending on the series that you are entering, or at least what we've seen from the Dodgers and other teams across the game of baseball in the past. Gregory is also joining us. Tony is joining us as well. Tony mentions one thing nobody's talking about is the Phillies might clinch. They very well could be hung over for the remainder of the series. We'll wait and see what happens. They did clinch a postseason spot. However, they still have a lot to play for because they still have to try to fight for an opportunity to go ahead and they have to go and fight for positioning in the postseason. They're still fighting for that number 1 seed. Again, Phillies are only 2 games back of the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League. That is going to be something that they're going to be fighting for down the stretch, and especially with 2 weeks to go, it's not like it's a week before the postseason to where you could see them kind of resting some guys where they kind of understand where their position is and they don't want to get anybody hurt. No, they're still in battle mode because number 1 seed, especially with that hostile crowd in Philadelphia, which goes all out for their sports teams, they want to have that number 1 seed. So I expect the Phillies best during the game tonight, even though they did clinch a postseason spot, and I'm sure there was some celebration that happened as a result of that. Johnny Owen, the 3 left-handers are going to be tough. There's no doubt that the Philadelphia Phillies, with their 3 left-handed starting pitchers, are going to be tough. And this is going to be imperative because these are likely pitchers that if the Dodgers match up with the Phillies, the Dodgers are going to have to face. There are players on the roster that the Dodgers rely upon that struggle a little bit more against left-handed pitchers. Max Muncy is an example of that. Really great hitter. You look at his splits between right-handed pitchers and left-handed pitchers, which we will do in a little bit later. There's a vast difference between the two, which means that against these left-handed pitchers, and this is not just talking about in this series, but this is talking about in the postseason, and this is why I was encouraged by some of the things that we've seen over the past couple of days, is you need to have some of your right-handed hitters really step up. Mookie Betts has stepped up quite a bit, but particularly when it comes to guys like Teoscar Hernandez and Andy Pages, in the absence of Will Smith, hopefully he is back by the postseason. There is no indication that he will not be back by the postseason, but he is out right now. So in their absence, right-handed hitters like a Teoscar Hernandez and an Andy Pages are going to be imperative to having some success against some of these left-handed pitching. I was encouraged by what we saw for Teoscar Hernandez. I hope this is a sign of things to come during what has been a disappointing season for Teoscar. It doesn't matter right now that the season has been disappointing because the path going forward means that there's going to be opportunities for him to be able to go out and have success. He's going to play a big role. Same with Andy Pages. Same with Will Smith, hopefully being able to get in there. And then it's about going ahead and having good, solid professional at-bats to hopefully get the Phillies into a position to where they have to utilize their bullpen. And then it's not the Dodgers are trailing, and then they have to go out and try to beat a Yohan Duran, who is having a lot of success right now. That's going to be the difficulty of going up against their 3 left-handed starting pitchers that are really, really good, that are going to help combat the Dodgers with some of their powerful left-handed bats, like an Ohtani, even though Ohtani's good, lefty versus righty. Freddie Freeman, who's good lefty versus righty, but especially for a Max Muncy, would be an example of somebody that this would be potentially impacting quite a bit. Let's continue to go a couple of these. Even though they know they have to get the bye, it's natural for a team to let down after they clinch. I think that's absolutely right with that. Let's go to a couple more. CDAV, can you pull up Conforto's stats over the past 30 days? Yeah, let's go ahead and pull up Michael Conforto's stats. And let's actually look at just the Dodgers in general as an offense over the past 30 days. What we're going to do is we're going to date this back to August 15th, because today is September 15th. We can go ahead and pull up these numbers really quick as an offense just for individual players. So this is Dodgers lineup as an offense. You wanted to pull up Michael Conforto's numbers over the past month. And really, especially because of the recent success that Michael Conforto has, and this is the difficulty about going back with just a month, because if it's a good week or so, that's going to kind of skew some of the results. But still, got to give credit to Michael Conforto. 261 batting average during the past month in 79 plate appearances, 329 on base percentage, 377 slugging. That is a 98 WRC plus. He's been about a league average hitter, which, especially with all the struggles that Michael Conforto has had, kind of is what you are hoping for when you're dealing with a Michael Conforto. For example, comparing him to Teoscar Hernandez, they've had about the exact same success. Same with Andy Pages. They're all, right now, over the past month, the three main outfielders, about league average hitters. And I'm not including Tommy Edman. I can still consider him utility type player that they're going to utilize, although Tommy Edman, I'm sure, is going to get a lot of time in center field during big moments going forward for the Dodgers. But yeah, Michael Conforto, you got to give him credit. Obviously, had some success over the most recent game against the Giants, had the home run in the game on Friday, and hope that he's able to continue to go ahead and swing the bat well. The Dodgers have kept him to this point. I anticipate the Dodgers keeping him on the roster, and him likely and almost assuredly making the postseason roster as well, based on the way they've utilized him and based off of the way that rosters are typically constructed, at the very least for the wild card round. I fully anticipate Michael Conforto to be part of that mix, and hopefully he's just gearing up for the final stretch. And if that's all that the Dodgers get is some success during September and October, the contract would be worth it, because that is what the Dodgers' goal is. It's to go ahead and get success during October. That is what they're looking for. Chuck Holson, baseball is a streaky game. Anything is possible, even when it's not likely to happen. Absolutely. Johnny Owen, we talked a lot about Tanner Scott during the game on Friday, which, if you want to have a deep dive into Tanner Scott, I highly encourage you guys to watch the show from when Casey and I did. Actually, it was Saturday. It was Saturday morning that we were able to do that. We did a little bit of a deep dive over the past, since the All-Star break. Tanner Scott has been one of, if not the worst pitchers in the game of baseball, and that is very well documented. We will get to postseason pitching options, especially for the wild card round, and we will see just how necessary Tanner Scott is going to be for that, or if he is even necessary, and can you construct a pitching rotation that doesn't even include Tanner Scott in the postseason? Because remember, postseason rosters, you do not have to have those big contract guys on the postseason roster. You have to have them on their 26-man roster during the course of the regular season. Postseason, it's different, which means that they don't necessarily have to have Tanner Scott on the postseason roster, but you hope, with the given level of success that he's had in the past, he is able to figure it out, and hopefully he can have a lot of success. Obviously, with what we've seen so far, there isn't a ton of optimism and hopes with that. Jeff says the Padres still have 3 with the Mets starting tomorrow in New York and 3 at home with Milwaukee. Yeah, so the Padres have a little bit of a tough schedule as well, because they have a series against the Mets, which the Mets have been struggling a ton. But with the Dodgers taking care of the Giants, and with the Mets winning the last game, the Mets still have a 1.5-game lead over the San Francisco Giants in the National League wild card race, which means they are still fighting for a playoff spot. Padres have not been able to take advantage of the continual opportunities that the Dodgers have provided them, so it's possible that they're struggling. Padres, I believe, have Mets, they have the White Sox for a couple of games, then they have Milwaukee, and then I think they close out the season with Arizona, or they might play Arizona at some point during that tenure, which, remember, Arizona right now is only 2 back of the Mets, so Arizona is fighting for a playoff spot as well. Chris Faaborg, I don't have so much blame for Scott in the first game as I do Verlander having good stuff that day. Yeah, the Dodgers needed to hit during that game. They put Tanner Scott in a bad position. This is something we've seen pretty repeatedly, to Johnny Owen's point about the struggles that Tanner Scott has had and the lack of trust that a lot of Dodgers fans have put on them. Let's see, let's get to a couple of these. Chris Osterberg, closers can't have negative attitude on the mound. We talked about that during the show on Saturday, Casey and I. Craig Osterberg, what happens if there's a tie between the Brewers and the Phillies? It would go to some tiebreakers. The first tiebreaker would be head-to-head, which actually That's a really good question, and it's not something that I'm going to be able to address on the show. So if any of you guys know what the head-to-head matchups with the Phillies and the Brewers are, I believe the first tiebreaker would be head-to-head matchup, who had the better winning percentage directly against each other, and then it would break down even further, and there's a lot of, because there's not a game 163 anymore, there would be additional tiebreakers that would happen. So I'm not exactly sure what would happen between that, if that was able to happen, but that's something to look up going forward if that is the case. But hopefully the Dodgers can put them in a position, even though don't necessarily, even if the Dodgers do end up in the wild card round, don't necessarily want to go to Philly for a series to play in Philadelphia against a tough team. Hopefully the Dodgers are able to win some games because that helps them build some momentum going into the last month of the season, and at least is able to win the series against the Philadelphia Phillies, and that ultimately pushes Milwaukee to the number 1 spot because the Dodgers are able to have some success against the Phillies. Chris Falborg, Emmett is going to shove tonight. He's learning every time he pitches. Absolutely right. Super excited with the way that Emmett Sheehan is going out there and having a lot of success. And I think he is going to be somebody, Casey had mentioned this on the show, he's going to be an absolute weapon, because I don't believe that there's going to be any room for him in a postseason starting rotation. You already have 5 guys that are ahead of him that almost assuredly the Dodgers would turn to before they get to an Emmett Sheehan. And this is nothing against what Emmett Sheehan has done, but the reality is they would likely turn to a Blake Snell, Yoshi Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, Shohei Ohtani, and Clayton Kershaw over an Emmett Sheehan in a postseason type setting. That is the reality, which means that it's not that Emmett Sheehan is going to be left off the postseason roster, because I do not believe that that's the case. It means you can utilize him in different ways and different weapons, and especially with the stuff that Emmett Sheehan has, he likely is going to play an important role in the bullpen in October, because that really is the only place to be able to put an Emmett Sheehan for that specific role. But I'm excited to see how he's able to do. I think this is going to be a good test against a really tough lineup in the Philadelphia Phillies, and hopefully he's able to match against Ranger Suarez and give the Dodgers a chance late in this game to be able to go ahead and score. Let's see. Conforto, CNAV says Conforto leveled off his swings, equaling live drives. That's exactly what we're looking for with Mike Conforto. We're just looking for good quality plate appearances and really solid contact as well. With Conforto, he can run into some home runs, but we're not looking for is some of those pulled ground balls that end up in double plays or ground balls to second base. We're just looking for some of those good, solid line drives, and I think that's what we're going to be seeing for Michael Conforto. Let's see. Next comment. Hi, do you know Shohei Ohtani's batting average against lefties in 2025? I was wondering splits left versus right. I don't have the batting average, although I can actually, you know what? I'll get this for you. I prefer some other statistics as opposed to batting average. If you have followed along this show, big fan of WRC+. Also, in relation to that, I think OPS is a little bit a better statistic, but for you, go ahead and get batting average. Because still is a valuable statistic to be able to see how batters are doing. Against lefties, Shohei Ohtani's hitting 277 versus righties, he's hitting 283. Not a huge difference between the two. If you look by WRC+, Shohei Ohtani versus lefties is a 139. He's 39% above league average against left-handed pitchers. Versus righties, it's a 185 against right-handed pitchers. There's more walks versus righties. If you look at the power component, which in part has to do with he sees a lot more righties than lefties, but he has 37 home runs against right-handed pitchers and 12 home runs against left-handed pitchers, and that's with 361 plate appearances versus righties and a little over 200 versus lefties. So more power, more walks against right-handed pitchers, a little bit of better success, but batting average-wise, about the same. Shohei Ohtani is really, really good at what he's able to do. Next question from Chuck Huddleston. Austin, how does Dryer's workload compare to his minor league innings pitch load? So this is a really good question, and this is something that, especially as we entered into this month, and especially because there was a lot of questions about the Dodgers' approach when it came to the trade deadline. this is actually one of the things that I was worried about with Jack Dreyer, because if we look at the number of innings he has pitched in a minor league career, he is well above what he has pitched during the minor leagues over the past couple of years. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that as I pull up the actual numbers that Jack Dreyer has pitched over the past couple of years. Part of the reason of that, 2023 was his first season coming back from surgery. He had missed several seasons, and so they were going to limit the number of innings that he had, combined with the fact that he was in 2023 in High A Great Lakes. They only have a 132 game season, so number of innings, and especially with the balance of all the pitchers that Great Lakes had, means that there's going to be a little bit more limited as far as the number of innings that he was going to get. But let's look at the number of innings Jack Dreyer over the past couple of years. In 2023, it was about 55 innings that Jack Dreyer threw. It was 57 last year during his numbers at the tenure at the minor leagues. This year, it's up to 70, which does have me a bit concerned because that is a big increase from what Jack Dreyer had pitched during his tenure at the minor leagues. You can look at number of innings if you want to look at physical number of pitches, which is probably a better indication as far as what he actually threw, because in 2023 it was 954. Last year, 872. This year, it's over 1,050 pitches that he actually threw, which is a better indication if you're just going for an equal comparison. Obviously, pitcher throws less innings if they have a little bit more struggle. Jack Dreyer has been successful just about any tenure that he's actually gone out during his tenure across minor league baseball. CNAV asks an incredibly difficult question, one that we are not going to completely address during the show today because I don't even understand all the aspects that go in. Ask the question, Austin, how is WAR calculated? So if you pay a lot of attention to advanced analytics, one statistic that comes up quite a bit is called wins above replacement. This is a statistic that is common across any position in the game of baseball. It doesn't matter if they're a position player, a designated hitter, a relief pitcher, a pitcher. They are going to have some value that tries to calculate their wins above replacement, their WAR. And what that value is indicated is a cumulative statistic, meaning the more you play, the more you can earn, or the more you can lose. A cumulative statistic to indicate how valuable a player is. Now, the reason why I'm not going to get into the how it's calculated is because there are different measures for calculating wins above replacement WAR depending on websites. If you look at Baseball Reference and you look at Fangraphs, some of their WAR values are different because they have different components in the mix. But essentially what they're trying to do is they're looking at the complete game of the player, taking into account a player's hitting. For example, with Fangraphs, they take into account their WOBA or their weighted runs created plus, WRC plus, and use other components to be able to help contribute to their offensive factor. They take into account base running. They take into account defense, numeric values that they're able to input from different calculations. And there's a lot of different weighting that takes place, and you get a numeric value from there. I know that does not go into complete detail of what goes on, but basically with WAR, it tries to take into account the complete component of an individual player. For pitching, it's the exact same thing. How well do they throw strikes? What is their ability to be able to prevent runs? I know for WAR, and when it comes to Baseball Reference, I think they are more into the ERA plus, into the actual results of the player for that particular year, whereas Fangraphs, I think, weighs a little bit more the underlying metrics like the FIP and XFIP. I don't know exactly how all that component works for calculating WAR, but there's a lot of metrics that go into it, and essentially what it's determined to do is to provide a numeric variable to see just how valuable a player has been for a particular season. It becomes difficult with WAR when you're comparing direct players. One of the reasons why I advise Casey not directly to do this is because you can't compare a player with 20 games played in their WAR to a player that has 120 games played with their WAR, because it's cumulative. It's not a fair comparison to be able to make because it doesn't take into account the sample size and number of games that you have, or rather the player with 20 games You have no idea what they're going to do with the extra 100 games that they have to be able to match with the number of games of the player with 120 games. Not a lot of nerdy baseball stuff, but that is a little small definition of WAR. A lot of websites don't even have the formula for WAR put out publicly, and I know I've looked for the public formula for WAR because I enjoy this type of stuff, try to calculate it because of how complicated it actually is, or at least it's really difficult to be able to find that. So hopefully that's able to provide you with a little bit more insight to CNAV. We could perhaps dive into a little bit more deep on a different show with some of that additional stuff. Johnny Owenchoy is now struck out 168 times this year, closing in on 200 strikeouts. Yes, he's also had a lot of success as a hitter this year. If you look at Shohei Ohtani, overall numbers still is really, really solid. And I would, with his ability, because I think he's hit, 49 home runs on the city, 49 home runs on the season. If he's able to combine with that type of power, is he still able to generate a lot of walks, still is able to hit the ball hard enough to put the ball in play, and still have a lot of success offensively with the bat, I would trade that with some elevated strikeout numbers, even though he's getting a lot of strikeouts total. Still, and this is actually something I'm curious about with Shohei Ohtani, is what is his actual strikeout percentage? Because I would prefer looking at strikeout percentage versus the raw number, because that doesn't tell you the complete story. With Shohei Ohtani, it's 25%. It is high. It is above league average as a hitter, but I think that tells you a better story because also Shohei Ohtani has 673 plate appearances. A lot more plate appearances if you were to compare the number of strikeouts for a player, for example, with a player like a Tommy Edman, who has almost half the number of plate appearances of Shohei Ohtani. Wouldn't just be a fair comparison for the two. CNAV, I think Kasperius has to be over his season-high innings pitched professionally. Actually, I think you would be surprised with Ben Kasperius because I actually don't think that's the case for Kasperius, because remember, Ben Kasperius was not a relief pitcher coming up through the minor leagues. He was actually a starting pitcher. So actually, when I was calculating some of the numbers, I think he's right around, or actually, and this is the case, he actually is below the number of innings he has pitched professionally across his tenure. So going back to 2022, first full season within the Dodgers organization, he pitched about 90 innings for the Dodgers. Again, he started 16 games, bulk inning guy for the Dodgers in the organization. 2023 was 108 innings that he pitched. Last year, combined with his minor league and major league, not including the postseason, it was about 97. So if you include some of the postseason innings, it's probably about the same as what he was, a little over 100 in 2023. This year, he's at about 80. So I think there's still some more in the tank for Ben Kasperius, albeit it's in a different role. So I think that's where there could be a little bit of a question mark as far as what Ben Kasperius is going to look like, because he hasn't been utilized in this role completely. Rather, he's been more of a starter throughout his tenure within the Dodgers organization. Craig Osterberg says, will Muncy hit against lefties in this series? I fully anticipate it. I don't think it necessarily is going to be starting all 3 games. I think there's going to provide an opportunity for Kike Hernandez to start a game or 2. I would probably anticipate maybe 1 game. But that is certainly something to watch, because this is with Max Muncy in a postseason type series. I think it's almost assuredly that Max Muncy is going to be in there pretty much regardless of what happens, assuming that he is healthy. And that's the biggest thing, is Max Muncy has been beat up over the past several days. And if Max Muncy is healthy, although this could provide an opportunity for the Dodgers to be able to provide him just with some additional rest going forward because of all the things that have happened to Max Muncy over the past couple of weeks, this could be an opportunity to provide him some rest, especially with the matchups that he is going up against during this upcoming series. But I still expect Max Muncy to start at least 1, maybe 2 of these games during this series. But I think it provides a unique opportunity, get Kike Hernandez some at-bats. So if you want Kike Hernandez to be that pitcher that can go ahead and be that postseason type spark plug, which he has been for the Dodgers in the past. You got to be able to get him some plate appearances. All right, so we've talked a lot. We've gotten some interaction, Q&A with the crowd, which I appreciate you guys, and we will get some more back in this because I'm going to need your feedback in just a minute because we're going to be actually going through a little bit of an exercise as far as the postseason roster is concerned. Now, let's take notice of this. There are still 2 weeks left of the regular season, 13 games to go, and a lot can happen. And I am fully aware that a lot can happen for the Dodgers. We've seen things spiral out of control or things happen to where the Dodgers have to pivot and make different decisions. And it is my hope that that is not the case for the Dodgers going forward in this season. I hope they don't have to deal with any additional injuries because that would throw things into a little bit of a loop. But let's assume the natural health of the starters. And let's also talk a little bit about postseason rosters because I think there might be a little bit of misunderstanding as far as how postseason rosters in the wild card round are constructed as opposed to the divisional round. So for the wild card round, which is right now where the Dodgers would be if the postseason started today, it's a 3-game series. All games are at the higher seeds home stadium. So in this case, the Dodgers would host a team for all 3 games, 2 games if necessary, best 2 out of 3 type of series, which means for this round, you only have to worry about these 3 games. You can change your postseason roster going from round to round, meaning from the division series or from the wild card round to the division series. You can have a different roster. Same thing from the division series to the championship series to the World Series. You can have differences in your roster depending on how you want things to be able to work out. There might be some additional rules that are in place. For example, what happens if you deal with some type of injuries. I don't know if they're eligible to be able to come back to that specific roster. But here's the essential part when it comes to this. Because the Dodgers are likely to match up in the wild card round, you only have to worry about 3 specific games. Let's look back at 2024 with the way that teams constructed their roster, because there is a rule when it comes to postseason rosters and Major League rosters in general. You do not have to have 13 position players and 13 pitchers. During a regular season, you best believe every single team, or at least majority of the team for the entire 162, unless there is a opportunity to be able to get somebody off of injury, they have a game or 2 covered. Most teams have 13 pitchers and 13 position players on their roster for the full 162, not including 20 rosters expanding. In the postseason, and in particularly the 3-game wildcard series, almost every team that I could find last year either went with 14 position players and 12 pitchers, or some even went with 15 position players and 11 pitchers. Now, the rule for Major League Baseball is you can only have up to 13 pitchers on your roster. You can't have any more than 13 pitchers. But you can have less pitchers than that, meaning you can have 12, you can have 11, you can have 10, you can have less than that on your roster. And if we were talking about the Dodgers going into the postseason type series, especially with the wild card round, I don't think it's fair to say that the Dodgers are going to set it up to where you're going to have 13 position players and 13 pitchers. Rather, I think with historical trends and with the likelihood of what the Dodgers are going to do, they likely are going to go with an 11 or 12 pitcher roster. Now for the exercise of what we're going to do, we're actually going to cut it over to here. These are the starters and the bullpen options of what we have for the postseason. Now you'll notice, why do I have Emmett Sheehan in the bullpen option? I have him temporarily as a bullpen option, particularly because I do not anticipate him being one of the starters for the Los Angeles Dodgers in the postseason. Obviously, if stuff happens, that quickly can change, but as for right now, I see him as a bullpen option because I do not see him leapfrogging either Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow, or Ohtani, and I think it's unlikely that he would hop over Clayton Kershaw as well. Rather, I think if you were to make one of these guys that if you're talking about Clayton Kershaw and Emmett Sheehan, talking about changing one of those guys into a postseason bullpen weapon, I think that is more likely to be an Emmett Sheehan. Combine that with the fact that the Dodgers probably need more right-handed pitchers to be part of their postseason roster than left-handed pitchers. But let's go ahead and utilize this exercise. So what we're going to do is we're going to first start off with the wild card round, and we're going to be talking through, and this is where we can get a little bit of interaction with you guys. It's because I want to know where are some of the battles that are being had within this postseason bullpen, and especially for this first wild card round. And is it something to, for example, do the Dodgers have to have a player like a Tanner Scott on their roster? So what we have the starters, we have the bullpen options. The blue is right-handed bullpen options. The orange is the left-handed bullpen options, which becomes incredibly important because if you look at postseason roster construction, and the reason why I have right-handed batters OPS against and left-handed batters OPS against is because it's very matchup based during the postseason, and you want to have guys that can get either left-handed batters or right-handed batters out and at least excel at one of those. I also included their overall ERA on the season at the big league level. And then for some of these pitchers, for example, Paul Gervais, Bobby Miller, Will Klein, and Landon Knack, didn't have a ton of experience at the big league level, so I did not include their right-handed batter and left-handed batter OPS against. This should be left-handed batter, not left-handed pitcher OPS. We'll make that change real quick. So this is what we have. These are the options that the Dodgers have. So in a 3-game series, you're likely going to go ahead and have 3 different starters. So let's say for the wild card round, you have Blake Snell, Yoshi Yamamoto, and Tyler Glasnow as starters. Remember, Shohei Ohtani, if you have him part of this mix, doesn't even have to count. So they technically could go with just 2 starters. But let's say they go with 3 different starters. And remember, this is for the wild card round. So this is just having likely 11 to 12 different pitchers as part of your mix, which means that you probably don't need an additional starter, which means that, for example, with a guy like a Clayton Kershaw, who potentially could be substituted with one of this mix, likely wouldn't be somebody that the Dodgers turn to. Rather, they would save and utilize him for when they needed extra pitchers during a longer series, in which case you need more than 3 starting pitchers. Again, I don't really like Clayton Kershaw in a bullpen type role. I'd rather use that for guys with a little bit more upside out of the bullpen rather than somebody that you can get some late and you could utilize during starting pitching during the postseason at some point. So let's say you have those 3 different pitchers, and this is going to track the number of pitchers that we actually have. So we have our 3 starting pitchers for the wild card round. Then let's go through some of the bullpen options right now, and let's talk about some of the guys that I think are very likely to make the postseason roster. Blake Trinan, one example of that, even though he is somebody that struggled during his tenure, during that one game against Baltimore, I think overall he's somebody who's had a lot of success. Let's go with somebody like Edgardo Henriquez. Let's say that you utilize an Edgardo Henriquez who also has had a lot of success. The high velo stuff, I think it can play really well during the postseason, and I think he's somebody that the Dodgers can go ahead and trust. Let's go down here. Alex Vesia, I think, is absolutely one that is going to be utilized in the postseason type setting. Same thing with Jack Dreyer. With the success that he's had this year, I think he's somebody that you want to keep around. Same thing, honestly, with an Anthony Banda. And here's the most important thing with Anthony Banda. You look at his OPS against left-handed batters, 464. And especially if this is something where the Dodgers are going to be going up and playing a team, for example, like the New York Mets, you need to have somebody that can go ahead and get a guy like a Juan Soto out. Go ahead and turn the matchup around and go ahead and get some of the other left-handed hitters out. Or in a postseason series against the Phillies, want to go ahead and get matchups against Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper for this series and for next series. I think he gets somebody who can play a big role. Already with that, you're at 8 different pitchers. Now, for this, you probably need somebody that can provide at least a little bit of length out of the bullpen, and this is where I think somebody like an Emmett Sheehan could really enter into the mix. He could provide some length out of the bullpen if one of these games gets out of control. Also, he provides a lot of upside as a right-handed arm out of the bullpen, and I think he could provide a lot of success. Also, and this is just me, and I think this is where you can get into some interesting debates as far as the final spots in the bullpen, because we are already at, and I don't think there's going to be really a ton of disagreements about the 9 that I have chosen, although there certainly can be little arguments that can be had. I think these are very realistic 9 pitchers that are going to be part of the mix. Now, let's say that the Dodgers go with 12 pitchers as part of their wild card round. That means that you have 3 spots for some of the following pitchers. Kirby Yates, who has struggled immensely. He would not be towards the top of the list of people that I would have. He's got an ERA in the 5s. You look at his matchups, even against right-handed batters, it's not really good. Michael Kopech is an interesting one. He's had really good success ERA-wise, and you look at the OPS against, because he's had some success during his very limited time. But it can be ineffective with throwing strikes. It can leave a lot of question marks, but there is a lot of high upside with Michael Kopech. With Brock Stewart, he is supposed to be starting a rehab start, and one of the main reasons why a team like the Dodgers went out and got a Brock Stewart is not because you only had to give up James Outman to be able to get Brock Stewart, which just one-on-one based on the future for the Dodgers and potential upside that they would have for the Dodgers in the role that they would have. Remember, James Outman was not going to be on the Dodgers in 2026 because he was out of options. Brock Stewart was definitely worth it. If he comes back healthy, if he comes back and he looks the case, the biggest thing with Brock Stewart is his OPS against right-handed batters was .390. That is one of the best in the league. In fact, if you look at individual matchups against righties or lefties, that is the best. And that is the best of any single matchup that is had on this list. And if you're looking particularly, because I think the Dodgers with Vesia, with Dreyer, with Bonda can get left-handed hitters out, with Brock Stewart, the case to be made with Brock Stewart is that he has the ability to go out there and get right-handed batters out. You could also make an argument for Ben Kasparius, who over the last month he was at the big leagues, was having some success. Beginning of the season, also had a lot of success on the season, and could be somebody, especially if you don't have a lot of trust in Yates and Kopech, and with Brock Stewart coming back healthy, Ben Kasparius could be somebody that you turn to. Kyle Hurt, mentioned on the show, is a little bit of the wild card. During his minor league tenure, has had a ton of success out of the bullpen for the Dodgers and striking guys out and getting guys out. You also have Roki Sasaki, who I'm a little bit less on the list, especially because we already have 9, and with some of the guys mentioned, I prefer them over Roki Sasaki because we have not seen Roki Sasaki have a lot of success at the big league level, and we have seen one game in which he was able to throw over 100 miles per hour. There's nothing against the future of Roki Sasaki on the Dodgers, but I think at this point, I think there's probably better options than him. Same thing with the rest of the guys on the list. Paul Gervais, Bobby Miller, Will Klein, and Landon Knack likely aren't going to be on the roster. And then that brings up the 2 lefties that haven't been chosen yet, and the aforementioned Tanner Scott, as we had talked about earlier in the show, struggling a ton. But when he is right, he's one of, if not the best left-handed reliever in the game of baseball. He has not showcased that as well. He has not showcased that at all this year. You also have Justin Robleski, who, if this was based off of the merit system, based on what he's done this season, has definitely earned it more than a Tanner Scott. He has a 3.82 ERA on the season, 717 OPS against right-handed batters, 462 against lefties. Now, tricky thing is, you have 3 lefties out of the bullpen, so you might be throwing another one of those lefties, but also Justin Robleski right now just might be one of the hotter pitchers as far as his performance on the Los Angeles Dodgers team right now, so perhaps he is somebody that you go ahead and turn to. So, if we're building up, and remember, this is for the wild card round, if we're looking at the Dodgers roster in the postseason as far as the roster is concerned for the Division Series, Championship Series, the Dodgers went with the typical 13 pitchers, 13 position players. That probably would be my guess as to what the Dodgers would do if they were to advance to the division series and beyond, as they would go to the traditional format. But even so, you're having difficult conversations because right now, let's say that we have to make this up to 12. You have to choose 3 between Kirby Yates, Michael Kopech, Brock Stewart, Ben Kasparius, Kyle Hurt, Roki Sasaki, Tanner Scott, and Justin Robleski. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that you have to choose 3 from. Or if we were to go, and this would include Clayton Kershaw, so really you have to choose 3 of those guys to be on your roster. Which means if you have no confidence in a Kirby Yates, no confidence in a Tanner Scott right now, let's say that this is the case, and let's go through the exercise as if that's the case. Let's say that you go with a guy like a Michael Kopech. Let's say that Brock Stewart comes back healthy and you're able to trust him. And let's say that you go ahead with the Justin Robleski. This could be the wild card round postseason roster if you have no confidence and if there's no assurance that Tanner Scott is going ahead and go ahead and have a lot of success in the postseason, and it would provide unique matchup. You can substitute Ben Kasparius for one of the guys in there. You can throw in a Kyle Hurt if you want, or if you want a Kirby Yates or Tanner Scott, you could throw them as part of the mix. What this exercise is intended to do is to showcase you how the bullpen, and especially how the wild card postseason round, is likely to go for the pitching side. Now let's go to the position player side. If we were going to the postseason roster for the postseason, we're going to the position player side for the postseason roster. If the Dodgers go with 12 pitchers for the wild card round, which again, this is under the assumption that the Dodgers are going to play in the wild card round, they would need, of course, 14 position players. Now, why do other teams have more position players than pitchers during a wild card round? One, it's because you don't need as many pitchers during that tenure, and typically what teams are going to look for is some of those lefty-righty matchups where they can have a lot of different platoon options. So when the Dodgers go ahead and throw out an Anthony Banda, instead of a 400 OPS against lefties, they can throw out a right-handed batter, and there's a lot more likelihood of having success because Anthony Banda struggles more against right-handed batters as opposed to left-handed batters. You can certainly utilize that. However, with the way that the Dodgers lineup is constructed, there's minimal platooning that the Dodgers actually do because they have Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy. Assuming Will Smith is healthy, that's what we're going to do. He's playing every day. Teoscar's basically playing every day. Andy Pages is basically playing every day. Tommy Edman, you can have some debate as far as whether he'd play every day, but he very likely is going to be playing fairly close to every day, or at least get regular reps, which means that basically have 8 of the position player roster spots filled out. I think some guys that are likely to make it into the postseason roster are Kike Hernandez, Miguel Rojas, and yes, a Michael Conforto, with the way that he's been hitting and with the way that the Dodgers typically utilize him. That gives you to 11 position players on a postseason roster. Again, we're going with the assumption that the Dodgers end up going with 14 position players in the wild card round. You do not have a backup catcher yet. And this is when the debate goes between Ben Rortvedt and Dalton Rushing. And I don't necessarily know what is going to happen with that. What my guess would be, and this is, and when it comes to postseason roster spot, I was actually texting this with the group chat that we have here at Dodgers Daily, is my guess with what they do as far as that postseason roster spot with Ben Rortvedt, who's had a lot of success, and Dalton Rushing, who is currently rehabbing and starting to hit a little bit with Oklahoma City. It becomes a question of how healthy do they truly believe Will Smith is. Because if they have very serious question as far as is Will Smith going to play every single day, then I think it becomes a real conversation as far as do we have Ben Rortvedt over Dalton Rushing if Ben Rortvedt is going to be the better defensive option for the Dodgers. And I think that's where there can be a lot of debate. Obviously, Dalton Rushing, I think, is better at throwing out base stealers, but there are going to be question marks, especially because of his most recent performances in LA. There was some struggling serious struggles as far as blocking the ball, and there's some wild pitches that went through. And to Ben's credit, he's had a lot of success in a Dodgers uniform. If there's question marks about Will Smith and his health, I think there's going to be a very serious debate as far as who is the better option to actually handle behind the plate for the Dodgers. But if the expectation is that Will Smith is going to go ahead and start basically every single game at behind the plate for the Dodgers in the postseason because he is the best catcher for the Dodgers, then the conversation shifts to, is there a better option that we can have as somebody that can be a bat off the bench? And I think even though the regular season at the big league level has not been good for Dalton Rushing, I think that's where his advantage could be, is there is more upside with the bat with Dalton Rushing as opposed to Ben Rortvedt. But it's a fascinating conversation. Either way, however you want to face it, they're going to have one backup catcher on the roster. They theoretically could have two catchers on their roster. That could be something that they could do, especially if they have 14 position players on their roster. So that leaves two more position players that they can utilize on their roster. And I think this brings up a fascinating question as far as how they are actually going to utilize these specific players and in what role are they going to give them. Because I think we've already established Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, Will Smith, Teoscar Hernandez, Andy Pages, and Tommy Edman are likely to get every day or just about every single day reps for the team going forward at the big league roster. And if they're not going in big league reps, I think you could see some Kike Hernandez if you want some October Kike. You could see some Miguel Rojas because he's had some success recently. And yes, you can even see a Michael Conforto getting starts against right-handed pitchers for the Dodgers. I think these 11 players that you see right here are likely the options that are going to be, especially in a wild card round, be the ones that are going to be getting 99%, if not 100% of the plate appearances that happen during that round, which means the platoon advantage that the Dodgers typically seek during that tenure likely isn't going to be something that they're going to be necessarily looking out for the most. One of the things that they particularly could be looking out for, though, is defense. And this is something that we've especially seen, and this is something that we've seen recently for the Dodgers, and this is where I give a little bit of a wild card for the Dodgers making the postseason roster, is do not be surprised if somebody like a Justin Dean makes the postseason roster. And let me make the case. It is not for his bat. The Dodgers have only entrusted him with 2 plate appearances at the big league level. Rather, it's for his range and his glove. And if the Dodgers trust Justin Dean with his range and glove, especially with the Dodgers outfield defense, and let's assume that they go with the outfield defense that they've gone to quite a bit, which is a Conforto, a Pages, and a Teoscar Hernandez. Or even if you have a Pages in left, Edman in center, and Teoscar in right field, which, yes, Teoscar Hernandez is very likely to be the right fielder for the Dodgers, even though he is better suited to be in left field, in my opinion. Or rather, I think the better argument is that Andy Pages is a better right fielder than Teoscar Hernandez, and I think he is an absolute weapon in right field. Likely isn't going to be something that they're going to pursue for whatever reason that they do. Which means that there likely is going to need to be late in games, especially late tight run games, they're going to probably look for better outfield defense. Which means that if you want to go to the best outfield defense that you could have, I think one of the arguments that you could have, and this would ultimately be, if I were to make a prediction as to what would happen, I think you could potentially see an Alex Call in left field, a Justin Dean in center field, and an Andy Pages in right field to close out a game. You can move Tommy Edman to second base where he is best at defensively and really solid defensively at the second base position, which means he doesn't have to play in center field the entire game. Although certainly you can make an argument, Tommy Edman just stay in center field. I think you can utilize him at the position at which he has had the most success in his big league career, in which case I think you are really solid defensively at all of the outfield spots in late inning games rather than utilizing an extra position player as a platoon advantage, which they likely wouldn't even receive at bats. I think you could potentially see them utilizing it as a defensive substitution late in games if the Dodgers have some sort of lead, so that they don't have to worry about Teoscar Hernandez late in the game in right field, or don't have to worry necessarily about Michael Conforto late in the game in left field. I think that would present you with the best defensive matchup late in the game if the Dodgers have some sort of lead, and Justin Dean would be able to provide some speed off the bench. Now, what does this lineup, what does this roster not include? It does not include a guy like a Hae-Sung Kim, which I don't know how they necessarily are going to utilize. You can make an argument, if you want to, over Justin Dean with Hae-Sung Kim, and utilize him in the exact same role, except utilize him at second base, keep Tommy Edman in center field, and utilize that matchup as making the best defensive lineup. Totally fair argument. In fact, that's probably the more likely outcome that the Dodgers would pursue. Or if you like Alex Freeland's defense better than a Hae-Sung Kim, you could utilize Alex Freeland in the exact same role. Or say, hey, we keep Justin Dean, Alex Call isn't going to get a whole lot of playing time, so we want to create the best defense possible. Although I think Tommy Edman, there could be an argument that you could have him over at second base, in which case that limits the role of a Hae-Sung Kim, or potentially an Alex Freeland, although Alex Freeland could play some third base if you want to do a Freeland at third, Edman at second base. Then you wanted to do the Justin Dean, you wanted to do the Alex Call and Andy Pages in the outfield, or however that math is able to work out. But if we're talking about postseason rosters, these are some of the things that you have to think about. So I'm curious with you guys, whether it comes to the pitching side, which this is the math, and it's very doable. If you do not trust some of the guys coming out of the bullpen, there likely is going to be somebody that you don't completely trust, but you don't. The Dodgers, if it's based on merit system, and if it's based on who's actually pitching the best, could turn to some of their younger guys that are actually performing the best and rely on them if they seriously do not have it in a Kirby Yates or a Tanner Scott or one of these guys. I think this could be something that is going to be fascinating to be able to watch. Obviously, as we're going to cut it back over to me and we'll get into some of the comment section, hopefully with some of your thoughts. This is not something to where things have been decided by the Dodgers. There's still a lot of games that are left to be played, and a lot of these things typically work themselves out. Hopefully they did not work themselves out, and the Dodgers have to make difficult decisions, because that means the Dodgers are healthy going forward. But this is what the math is looking like for the Dodgers. Again, wild card round, very likely that the Dodgers are going to have less pitchers than position players, which opens up additional opportunities, typically really for the Dodgers, for defensive replacements late in the game, because they will not need 5 different starters to be part of the mix. Once the Dodgers hopefully advance to the division round and beyond, if they are in the wild card round, or if they start the season in the division round, math changes a little bit. Dodgers would likely go to 13 pitchers and 13 position players, although that isn't a guarantee in and of itself. Let's go ahead and go to some of the comments right now, so hopefully we'll be able to get some interaction and provide some of your thoughts. Who are some of the players that you want to see as part of the postseason roster, and see just how we can make this team going into October as good as it possibly can be. Let's see. Gregory, I want Freddie in cleanup spot. Put Will Smith in the 3 spot. Could be something that they could do going forward. Just going into a couple of these. CNAV, we can have an extra pitcher due to Ohtani being a 2-way player. Absolutely is right. An absolute weapon that the Dodgers have, and one of the best things about Shohei Ohtani is he is the bonus pitcher, which means that in October, you do not, when we're doing the math over there, include Shohei Ohtani in any of that. Or if you do include Shohei Ohtani, you can have up to 14 different pitchers, because Shohei Ohtani primarily counts as a position player, and you can utilize him as the extra player going forward. And then it's talking about some of the players that they want as part of the mix. CNAP says add Kyle Hurt, and definitely add Robo. Chris Fallberg is in agreement with Robo. CNAV, wow, 4 lefties in the pen, 5 with Scott. Wish he'd turn it around. Unfortunately, it's between his ears right now. Yeah, that could be something that they could have. With both Will Smith and Rushing banged up, carry 3 catchers, worked vet, that could be something that the Dodgers pursue. One thing that limits you in being able to do is add in defensive replacements. So I wouldn't be... It was something I was actually very seriously considering for the Dodgers, is having a 3rd catcher be part of the mix. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Paul says, hope Alex Call is able to make it. He's clutch. Let's see, CNAV, Hae-Sung Kim for late innings pinch runner. He's versatile as well. Late inning defensive replacement. Need a base steal. Hae-Sung Kim could be part of the mix. Absolutely could be part of that mix as well. Chris Farberg, until we know for sure how Will Smith recovers over the next 3 weeks, we won't know the value of carrying 3 catchers. Yeah, that's one of the things we got to watch out for the most, is look out for how Will Smith is doing, because I think that's going to be, well, it is worrisome, as Chuck Huddleston is stating, something that is going to determine some of the decisions that the Dodgers are going to have. Showtime LA, hope Josue de Paula isn't hurt. He hasn't been in the lineup in a few days. One thing to be able to work out, as we'll get to a couple more comments before we wrap things up, before I got to go here today, is the Tulsa Drillers. One thing that we had talked about quite a bit on the show is the postseason race for some of these teams. Great Lakes and Tulsa were fighting for a postseason spot. The Quakes clinched a postseason spot, did not advance to the next round, but the Tulsa Drillers have made the postseason. And for the people that I've had the privilege to be able to get to know and be able to watch grow in Great Lakes, that have moved up to Tulsa either this year, last year, or some of the members that were part of the 2023 Great Lakes Club, I'm so happy for those guys to be able to go ahead and make the postseason. And I couldn't be more excited for the Tulsa Drillers to go out there and fight for a postseason spot, for some of the players that were on the 2023 Great Lakes Club to have a shot at redemption in the postseason when they had their Game 3 in the Midwest League Championship be taken away as a 7-inning game, and Justin Robleski, who was starting Game 2, his absolutely stud performance that he was having be taken away because of a rainout that happened during the 4th inning, I believe. A second chance of redemption for some of those guys, and a chance at postseason berth for many great people and phenomenal players, even better people than players in that league. It's going to be something that's going to be incredibly fun to watch. Tulsa Drillers are taking on the Springfield Cardinals. If you are in Tulsa, I could not recommend watching postseason baseball more to you guys. Go ahead and watch the Tulsa Drillers tomorrow at, I believe it's 7 o'clock Central. It could be 6 o'clock Central. I don't know if that's in Eastern time or Central time that I was looking at. Sometime during the evening, the Tulsa Drillers take on the Springfield Cardinals. Jackson Ferris is going to be taking the mound in Game 1. Springfield won both the first and second half in the North Division in the Texas League, so it's going to be a tough matchup, but I couldn't be more excited. Be interesting to see, because Josue de Paula was, along with Zaire Hope, along with a Cam Day, along with an Adam Serenowski, all called up to Tulsa to try to help them clinch a playoff spot. Now that they made a playoff spot, now they have a chance to fight for a Texas League title, which would be so impactful for the people of Tulsa and for the players that I have seen and grown so much, and especially for an organization that values, as much as the Dodgers do, winning at the minor leagues, because winning at the minor leagues helps with the development and helps with the process of a winning organization. This is going to be a big week for the Tulsa Drillers. Check them out tomorrow night. If you are not going to be in Tulsa, you can watch it on the MiLB app or Bally Sports app, or however you're able to watch some of the minor league games. Absolutely check that out. Get you a couple more comments right now. Let's see, Chris, that's why I was thinking of carrying 3, both Rushing and Smith. Won't be 100%. The question would be, would you even utilize Rushing during the series? In which case, could you just use Ben as a backup option for Will Smith? Chris Fauberg, I don't think we have to carry 3 catchers. My vote is Hae-Sung Kim. Could be something that they do. Then a lot of thanks for the good job. And I want to thank you guys for the privilege it is to be able to interact with you guys, talking about the Los Angeles Dodgers from here in the state of Michigan. For my passion of watching the Dodgers affiliates, to being able to be here to share some of my insight with my knowledge of the game of baseball, and particularly with my knowledge over of analytics and with a lot of baseball statistics from a passion of mine. It's an absolute privilege to be able to interact with you guys and to do it in a format like this. I also want to, of course, thank Casey for all the different things that he has been able to provide me with these opportunities right here. So, just letting you guys know going forward, there will be upcoming shows that we're able to do. I do not know the upcoming schedule of when we're going to do shows. With baseball being in the regular season, the regular schedule that we typically set for the off season gets a little bit varied, but there will be upcoming shows that happen. Casey, I'm sure, will be doing some shows. He'll be doing it with Coach Holt, with Mark, with Coach Barikoff. I will be part of the mix as well, and we'll try to present you with as many shows as we possibly can as the Dodgers are entering the stretch run, entering into a fight for postseason positioning. Tonight is very important for the Dodgers if they want any hope of getting the number 2 seed in the National League. They must sweep the Philadelphia Phillies. It'll be an incredibly tough task to be able to do so, but if the Dodgers want to go ahead and advance far in the postseason, everything from here on out is going to be incredibly tough, and you have to have and start to have that giddy up postseason elimination mindset to do whatever it takes to go ahead and win baseball games. And that is what I expect from the Dodgers tonight. Emmett Sheehan is going to be on the mound. You're going to be seeing it at, I believe, 7 o'clock, 7:10, 7:05. I don't know exactly the time, Pacific time. Be sure to check